started off in advertising, and I was an account man, which means you have to deal with a lot of companies and clients, and I did 20 years of that, and eventually I thought enough is enough, so I set up on my own, and I spent the last 10 years or so advising clients on how they should run their businesses. So I'm often asked, why is it that so many people in business waffle or bullshit? And I think there are three main reasons. The first is that it appears that people think that if they waffle sufficiently authentically, that it asserts their intellectual authority over the person that they're speaking to. Now, this may be a double bluff, because of course a lot of us on the receiving end of this stuff don't think that that person has the intellectual upper hand, but the person speaking it appears to feel that that's the case. So that's one possibility. Another possibility is simply the fact that we've heard so much of this, generally in the media, via politicians, and particularly Americans, that in fact everybody just starts talking that way as well because they think that's the thing to do. And the third one, I think, is something to do with language at work, and sometimes with clients and customers, and that is that people feel that they should be saying things in the same way as their clients and customers and colleagues, because if they don't, then they're going to get fired. Or put another way, I'll keep speaking exactly like everybody else and then I won't get fired. I think bullshit's really unproductive for lots of different reasons. The simplest way to explain it probably is what you might call a chain of misunderstanding. So for example, if a boss waffles or bullshits to a member of staff, then a member of staff has got pretty much any excuse to say, I've got no idea what you're talking about, therefore I'm probably not going to be able to enact what you think you want me to do. What's very tricky about bullshitters is that they're neither on the side of the truth nor on the side of lies. Now if you think about it, if somebody's clearly telling the truth, that's easy. If they're clearly lying, funnily enough, that's quite easy too, because at least you know where you stand. But the really, really difficult thing with someone who's bullshitting is that they're not going for one or the other. They merely grab anything that seems to suit their case, and you've got no idea where you stand. Now, waffling, I think, is a completely different thing. I train a lot of people, and what I often find is that a lot of people start talking before they've started thinking. And a lot of people tell me that they haven't got enough time to think. Now, because they haven't got time to think, apparently, although I do suggest that they spend 5 minutes at the beginning of every day working out what they're going to do, what they tend to do, therefore, is they just march up to someone at their desk or in the corridor and they just start talking. Now, when they do that, in all probability, they are waffling. They've got some rough, unformulated thought, they haven't worked it through, and they're pretty much assuming that by dumping it on someone else, it'll help them work out what they think. Now, when it comes to waffle, of course, you can either be a waffler, and I do get a lot of people in training admitting, self-confess, I am a waffler, I do this to people, I dump things on people verbally. But of course also that means that you've got wafflees, and they are the people who are on the receiving end of the waffle. And where it gets interesting, of course, is that you never know when it's coming. So for example, you could be walking up the corridor and suddenly someone leaps out of a room and says, have you got a minute? And before you know it, you're involved in a deep conversation about something that you had no warning of whatsoever. This is massively embarrassing, but people do strange things as a result. So for example, the wafflee, particularly if they're in a junior position, often thinks, I should really know something about that, or at least I'm embarrassed that I don't, and they start waffling as well. So weirdly, you get this odd thing where one person who doesn't know what they think jumps someone who doesn't know that they were going to be asked that, and the two of them end up having a conversation for 20 minutes and making no progress at all. Now, you immediately know that if someone's repeating themselves, there's a strong chance that they've actually only got one point. But in order to make it feel as though they've got more, they just keep saying the same thing. So if someone does that to you, you know for sure they're waffling. Another example might be spurious sources. Now, a lot of people try to make it sound as though what they're saying is authentic and well researched, but in fact they've just grabbed a couple of random figures from somewhere or a quote, and when you burrow into it, you find it's got nothing to do with it whatsoever. You may even find that that data source contradicts what they're saying, but as we've established with bullshitters, they just randomly grab anything that makes it sound as though they're authentic. if you are honest enough to confess that you are a bullshitter yourself, then it really is worth taking time to ponder whether that's how you'd like to be. So if you fast forward 40 years and you're sitting by the fireside saying that was my career, do you really want to be that type of person? Now most people say, no, I don't actually. Now, so here's a simple thing that you can do to sort this out. If you're a very busy person, try to set aside 5 or 10 minutes at the beginning of each day to make sure that you know why you're doing what you're doing. That's a day pattern type of thought. Quite separate to that is try to make sure you can think straight before you talk at all. It's actually far better to say nothing whatsoever than to produce a load of nonsense. Now this may be in a meeting, it may be in the corridor. So for example, if you're jumped with a question in the corridor that you weren't expecting, you can judge the time lapse between the question and when your answer needs to come out. It might only take 2 seconds to pause, because we don't like pauses, but 2 seconds isn't very long. Funnily enough though, it conveys to the other person that you really have thought about it, rather than just come up with some old nonsense to fill the time in. Now if you're sitting in a meeting, obviously life gets a little bit more complicated because meetings can run on for a long time. And in fact, I ask people in training, on average, how much of your working week do you spend in meetings? And it varies between 40 and 80%. So that could be up to 4 days a week. Now in these long meetings, lots of people showboat, hold court and generally use up a lot of airtime, and nobody seems to know why. The interesting thing is when one intelligent person who's clearly been listening to what the discussion is has got the balls and the clarity to say, right, so as far as I can tell, the main issues are A, B and C. I propose we do D. What does everybody think? And that is a brilliant business skill.